Hi, everybody. Dan Illman, Ashley Mailloux, kicking off a 50-cent pick four at Kentucky Downs on Saturday with race number 8. Let's throw up the field for the Grade 3 Nashville Derby and as many races at Kentucky Downs, basically all of the major stakes races, giant fields. Can't beat this purse for the horsemen, 3.1 million for the Grade 3.
Yeah, you don't see that too often. I can't name, I think, 10 times a year that we would even see anything like this. You mentioned it. Kentucky Downs is the place to be with their boutique meet that has expanded over the last several years. The purses are good. And with a purse like this, you get a full field and you get a quality field here. And I think this is intriguing. When we talk about these races, Dan, at Kentucky Downs, the configuration is very unique as well. And mile and a fifth, 5/16 is a very specific distance.
Some European horses coming in should benefit from the sort of European type configuration at Kentucky Downs with all the nooks and crannies. But maybe the horse they're all going to have to beat, Ashley, is the number 8 Carson's Run, a multiple Grade 1 stakes winner who sure looked good in the Saratoga Derby last time.
And I like the progression that he's made. His figures have taken a little bit of a step forward from 2 to 3. I really don't think he's done anything wrong this year. Obviously, he was disqualified in his first start as a 3-year-old, but his last two, he's been right there. And I felt like his trips, they've been quite good where he is comfortable several lengths off the pace, has a really nice late turn of foot, and especially two back, he dominated that competition.
12 in the body of the race, 2 also eligibles. Let's throw up the Timeform US pace projector. The pace should be fair, and the number 2, Brumar, has shown speed. Last time out at Ellis Park in one of the prep races for this, he was up and on the pace, set legitimate fractions, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, he's at very legitimate fractions and came up a little bit short. He'll have to face Cameo Performance once again. I do think he'll be forward. You can see the 3 Navy SEAL. Even looking at his progression since coming over from overseas, he's been pretty close, especially last time out. I thought he ran a very well meant second at Saratoga, going a mile and a 16. So you never know, Dan, with these longer races, what the pace actually will be. But I do think with this group, as you've said, it'll be decent fractions early.
And if the pace is hot, keep an eye on the 9 Cameo Performance, who ran down a Brumar last time out at Ellis Park. Note the LP flag. That horse has the fastest Timeform US late pace rating. We'll kick things off with the number 1 Rothschild, and I've seen a lot worse 30-1 shots in my day, Ashley. Rothschild was treated like a very good horse last year at 2 by Tim Yakteen, running in a couple of graded stakes races. He switched to turf towards the end of last year, just missed in the DeMille, and off the layoff last time out, ran quite well. It was a closer's race, and he made the first run into the pace.
Yeah, and maybe he came up a little bit short when it was all said and done. He did surrender the lead late, but I thought it was a good performance. And I think the interesting thing that you mentioned, he's not only gone from dirt to turf, and the turf only being those last 2 tries, but he's taken a step forward in terms of figures. He seems to have adapted the surface very well. I actually liked the effort 2 back. Stay Hot was a next out winner. Whether I know he's going to be able to handle the mile and 5/16 distance, that's a different question. But like you've said, at 30-1, I do think there's maybe a small case to be made for him in the exotics.
The horse that finished 6th in the Oceanside last time out came back to place in a stake at Del Mar with an 85 bar. All about distance for Rothschild. He'll be stretching out past a mile and a 16th for the first time in his career. Brumar is the number 2. We talked about him on the pace projector segment, and he just set a legitimate and pressured pace last time at Ellis Park. That third quarter and 23 and change, you would have thought it would have taken the starch out of this horse. He put the other pace away and was just run down late.
He was, and I wonder a little bit, Dan, I'm curious to get your thoughts, if he's more of a miler, a mile and a 16 sort of horse at best. His last 2, he has tired a little bit in both of those. But I do think from a handicapping standpoint, he is interesting. He's a consistent horse who figures to at least muddle the pace. And sometimes we know if the fractions are soft, horses have no problem getting at a distance. I think for him, the issue is there's a ton of European invaders in here. The Euros typically, they relish these longer distances.
I think you make a very good point about the distance. However, to me, he's more of a middle distance runner, but you also mentioned his admirable consistency. I talked to Safi before he ran in the Murphy, and that was a good third place effort. And he said the one bad race at Churchill Downs came when he just didn't handle the turf course. Now, how many times have we seen that over the last few years where Churchill Downs, you either like it or you don't? The 3 is Navy SEAL, who began his career overseas. It was sort of a little bit of a disappointment, I thought, in his first few starts. His most recent race was at Saratoga. It was a first-level allowance. On paper, it looked like a really good spot for him, and he ran okay, but he didn't get it done.
Yeah, he ran okay, and maybe he's needed some time to acclimate. I obviously think maybe he's a little bit more suited for the turf than the dirt. It was an interesting spot to even see his return to the races, but it's Wesley Ward. Wesley is not afraid to place horses sort of anywhere that he sees fit, and they had to deal with an off track, right, and had to deal with the main track, which was not the goal for this one. So at least he was better second time out. Now he's got to go back to racing without Lasix, which shouldn't be an issue for him. And look who's booked to ride, Jamie Spencer. So just a little bit of an interesting horse in here who another one that's going to need to go further as well. When you look at his success, his lone win has been at the mile.
I wonder if this distance will be good for him, though, compared to the 1 and 2 horses in this race. He certainly is bred to go long. The 4 is Stromberg, and this is a horse that really has shown an affinity for the distance. He has sort of a grinding running style. He lacks a bit of explosion. I thought his last race was okay in France. He faced a pretty impressive unbeaten winner from the Godolphin team, and he just settled near the back, and he just missed picking up second while no threat for the winner. He probably needs a little bit of pace help.
I think so. I really like his efforts, even 3 and 4 back off the freshening. I thought they were really well meant second efforts there, both in Ireland. You mentioned the effort in France was respectable. In some ways, he's 6-1 on the morning line. I do feel like he's a little bit of a wild card, looking that he's run well at 1.25 miles. You don't see a ton of difference there, stretching out and getting that additional 16th of a mile. And that's what these horses are bred for, right? These kind of longer distances here. And I'm a little intrigued by him, curious to see the trip that he'll get in this race.
White Palomino is the number 5, and you have to think he has a lot of upside potential still. He's only raced 4 times, and he ran so well in his most recent start. Let's take a look at that race. That's the Belmont Derby. He showed speed in here, and he set very reasonable fractions, 50-1, 114-2. But he digs down deep, and he's only going to get beat ahead by a very good horse. Trickery would come back to win the Secretariat at Colonial with a 96 buyer.
And Trickery, you mentioned the 96 buyer, by far his career best figure next time out. I thought the way that he won at Colonial was quite easy. And I think White Palomino is a little bit intriguing from a pace perspective as well. Likes to be forward. We've seen that, though, in the last 2 efforts. And I do realize when you look at the most recent effort, they went slower, but they were going 1 mile and 3/16. And I thought 2 back, at least that pace was honest at the 1.125 distance. Now you wonder, though, he gets caught each of those races. Is that going to happen again? Who knows? I just feel like Chad is also one who has these horses kind of at peak form for these bigger sort of tests in their career. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him take a step forward.
Bellum Justum is the number 6, going out for Frankie Dettori and Andrew Balding, a horse that's run very well between 10 and 12 furlongs, including his most recent race, a Group 3, where he was making up strong late ground, and I thought he had that race in the bag, and he came up just a little bit short. At first glance, I was thinking maybe he hung a little bit, but like the horse that beat Stromberg last time out, that's an unbeaten horse, very lightly raced, a lot of upside from top connections. Bellum Justum just looks like a good fit in this spot.
Yeah, I think out of the European sort of invaders in here, he might be the strongest, at least in what he shows in his resume and how you've mentioned already, how he's handled, say, 10 to 12 furlongs in his career. I could go either way in his last performance. I thought he was going to get it done, and he didn't. And maybe that leaves a little bit of something to be desired. But you go down the page, I mean, he's a very consistent horse who has no problem being a bit forward, or he can sit a little bit more off of it. I like his adaptability. Frankie's coming to ride for these connections. To me, I think 7-2 on the morning line, that was pretty fair based on his resume.
The 3rd European invader is the number 7, See the Thunder, now with trainer Cherie DeVoe. Just didn't face the top class competition over there, not the sort of quality of competition that the 4 Stromberg, the 6 Bellum Justum faced. They stepped him up into a stake last time out. He did show good speed, but he just couldn't go with those horses late. So I think there are some class questions he has to address.
There's class questions. We only see the 1 published drill. There's very little known about him. And I think the other factor to consider, with all of these horses, is they're coming over and they're not here for several months at a time. We're talking weeks. And in the case of this horse specifically too, this is a barn switch. You can see now on the barn of Cherie DeVoe had that workout at Keeneland. You don't have that much time to get acclimated to a horse. So I do think 12-1 on the morning line, I think he's going to offer some more value than that. I wouldn't be surprised seeing him go off at a little bit of a higher price, but I had a tough time, Dan, making a case for him when I saw some of the others in here.
Trainer Christophe Clement's done a fine job with the number 8 Carson's Run, who won the Grade 1 Summer, going a one-turn mile last year. You get the feeling when watching the Woodhaven, his seasonal debut, that maybe they were just racing him back into shape for bigger and better in the spring and summer and fall, and he showed it last time out. Here's the Saratoga Derby after a win in the tail of the cat during the Monmouth meet, and Carson's Run got a fast pace. This race did go to closers. The pace melted down, but I really like the way he kicks in the final 16th.
Yeah, he looks really good in these final stages approaching the wire. I thought it was a really nice performance. I like that he took another step forward. And I agree with you. I think probably that first race off the shelf he might have needed. It was only going a mile. You also look at the halftime a lot, for 4 furlongs into a race, a lot quicker than he had seen in the past. So I think out of the, should we say, North American based horses, he's probably the best of the bunch because he doesn't need the lead. If he can just track off the pace, I don't think he'll have an issue with the distance. And he's really hard to ignore off of recent form.
Cameo Performance, again, is the fastest time form U.S. late pace rating. And he's improved from an emotional standpoint. He's very green when we first saw him in North America. Brendan Walsh has done a very good job with him, though, and he was able to run down a Brumar last time out. But he got a setup in that race, and now he has to face tougher competition going a little longer.
Yeah, there's a lot being thrown at him here. He's another one, though, I think, based on how he answered the test last time out, I understand why they're going to try this spot with him. I just wonder, compared to some others in here, Dan, if he's going to be too far off of it, depending what the pace is. If it's not necessarily quick enough for him, I don't know where he'll get in here. You look at his effort 2-back-2, and you look at that field. Obviously, they sent him up to Woodbine. He faced a lot of plate horses in there. He just could not get to Essex Serpent, who had more speed than he did. I just wonder if we're going to see a similar thing where he just has too much left to do.
The number 10 is Nomos, 20-1 on the morning line. Todd Pletcher, Julien Leparoux ran okay last time. They really stretched him out. A 1 3/8 race, the Kent, on a very hot day at Delaware, chased a solid pace, didn't have the cleanest trip. It was good to see him rebound off a bad performance at Churchill Downs in a situation where, again, I don't think he cared for the course.
No, I don't think he did either. And I thought last time out, considering the trouble that he got in, he did the best that he could. He raced very well in that field. And you talked about the weather. It was also a big field in the Kent. And I'm not saying that the quality of the Kent is the same as this group, but he had to get into a good rhythm early. He was able to, but still had some issues in that race, and find it an interesting spot for him. He's going to need to take a step forward. I do think on the number side, he is a little light, but numbers aren't everything. And you go down the page, he has faced some of these horses in the past, and he hasn't been too far off of them as well. So maybe from an outsider perspective, he's one that I could see considering in the exotics, as I don't think he'll be super far off of it early.
If ever there was a horse for course track, it's Kentucky Downs. While the number 11, Laginas, has been sort of nibbling in recent starts, his debut came at Kentucky Downs, going 6.5, and he loved it at 11-1 for Steve Asmussen. Coming into this race in underrated form. Let's watch the National Museum of Racing at Hall of Fame. I know this race is only at a mile. There wasn't a ton of pace on. He was on the outside. He mid-moved into the slow pace. He is going to get beat, but I thought it was a useful effort for a horse that likes the course. Maybe he doesn't have the upside of some of the more lightly raced horses in this race, but he's solid.
And I do think this race does set him up nicely. He's going to stretch back out in distance. You mentioned that he had to adapt. He was more forward than we had seen, say, 3, 4, 5 starts ago in Kentucky, where he was closing from off of it. And I wonder if just having that mile race under him, he can be a little bit closer, because you can see, we've talked about there are some closers in here. If you go back to the spring in Kentucky, I would say he was a closer. He likes to be in the back flight and make a late run. And maybe with that race under his belt, he won't be so far back. And I kind of prefer that closing kick that we've seen in the past if he can be closer to it.
While the number 12, Cagino, sort of got close but no cigar finishes earlier this spring, he showed ability in those starts, and he finally put it all together last time out at Churchill Downs in the Audubon, where he beat 3 of these. But it must be noted, he got a brilliant ride and trip that day from Pratt, where he was able to get to the lead and just walk on the front end while uncontested. He sprinted on home and earned a very good 91 Beyer speed figure. Not sure that trip is available to him here. I think 4-1 is a little bit light, but I won't be surprised if he drifts just a bit.
My thoughts exactly. I thought the morning line on him was light. They're going 1 mile and 5/16. I get it. He has the outside in here. I'm not necessarily concerned about that. He has enough early foot, but I don't think he's going to have the walk in the park that he had last time out. He just made the lead very easy and go down the page. He's never done that before. And now to expect him to not only do it here, but be able to carry himself if it were to happen at this extended distance, I have reservations. If he was a different price, maybe there's more to talk about. But if he's anywhere near 4-1, for me, I'd probably pass on him.
Two horses on the also eligible list are going to be big prices coming off the board finishes. So we'll take a look at our top selections for the Grade 3 Nashville Derby. We like the European horses just in different order. You're going with Belmont Justum, a horse. I think this turn back to 10.5 furlongs over this sort of race course is really going to help him a lot.
I'd be lying if I told you I didn't flip-flop between these like 10 times. I flip-flopped between these horses back and forth, and I thought there were different cases. I think the 4 is a little bit more of a wild card in this spot, where I think when we look at the 6 and what he's accomplished at these longer distances, he's right there. I do think he should be getting the right trip, where he's not going to be too far off of it, not necessarily on the lead, but he could be forward in here. I like that Frankie's booked to ride, but I do think, Dan, the horse that you went with, Stromberg, you're going to get the better value at 6-1 in the morning line.
Yeah, I'm using both of these horses in multiple race wagers. Again, we're kicking off a 50-cent pick four. Belmont Justum's accomplished more, as you mentioned. He has the faster time form ratings. He's probably more well-regarded overseas. I just wonder if maybe Stromberg gets a little bit more pace than what he's used to in Europe, and he can come with a bit of a kick. 6-4-8-5 for Ashley, 4-6-12-8 for me. It's the Grade 3 $3.1 million Nashville Derby on a super Saturday card at Kentucky Downs. Good luck.